Well, here we are in my little red truck that we're gonna use as a guinea pig for our project. This is a 2003 GMC Sonoma with the little 2200 four-cylinder engine and a 5-speed manual transmission, and this is rear-wheel drive. This is not a four-wheel drive truck. Currently, this truck has right at 247,000 miles on it. Now, as you can guess, this probably doesn't get near the fuel economy as it did when it was new. But she still does pretty well, averaging around 20 miles per gallon. One way we can get an idea of how efficient this truck runs is to compare the thermal efficiency of this engine to the OTTO cycle for ideal spark ignition gasoline engines. We're going to pull some baseline information off of this engine, such as the intake air temperature. Once the engine's up to temperature, we're going to run at about 65 miles per hour, around 2,500 to 3,000 RPMs. Besides the intake air temperature, we're also going to pull off the combustion temperature, the exhaust gas temperature, and we'll also take a reading on what type of airflow is actually coming in through the intake, just in case that comes out to be helpful. We'll take this information and compare it to the ideal cycle using the PV and TS diagrams for the OTTO cycle. So, first thing first, let's get some tools. Okay, we're going to need some basic tools, basic tools for completing this task. And let's, of course, remember where we put them. First, we need an engine scanner, so we can measure the intake air temperature and get other readings off the other engine sensors, such as exhaust gas temperature, our speed, our RPM, whatever information we can get off of this. And next we need a compression tester, which the compression tester is right here. Here we go. A nice little Pittsburgh compression test kit. And then we also need our airspeed meter. And is that under here? What's this? Is this it? Oh, no, that's battery low. I've been wondering where that went. Oh, well, I gotta remember that's right there. So now I gotta see, where is the air meter? When was the last time I used the air meter? Oh, wait a minute. There we go. My little air meter. So we will use these, get some of this engine open up, take some measurements, and we'll see where we go from there. Okay, now that we've taken those measurements, here's what we have so far. This is a 2003 2.2 liter four-cylinder GMC Sonoma. The engine displacement is 2,182 cubic centimeters. It is a four-cylinder engine, so that gives us a displacement per cylinder of 545.7 cubic centimeters. From our calculations from our deck clearance, our compressed gasket height, the dish of the piston, the head volume, and then the cylinder bore and stroke, we come up with a total volume per cylinder of 614.25 cubic centimeters. Now, take away the actual bore and stroke volume, that leaves us a combustion space of 66.8 cubic centimeters. From 614.26 cubic centimeters down to 66.8 cubic centimeters, that actually gives us a compression ratio of 9.17, as opposed to the normally published 9.0 compression ratio. Now that we have that baseline data, we can use that information to fill our PV and TS diagrams for the actual cycle results. Before we do this, we actually retrieve some of the information on the properties of air. As you can see in this table information here, we obtain the CP, the CV, our K value, and our R value from the tables in the book. Additionally, some of the information that we looked up online or calculated from the results from the scanner on the engine and the test is the actual compression ratio, our T1 temperature of 352 Kelvin, our actual compression at 0.2 on the PV diagram of 896 Kelvin, and based off of our exhaust gas temperatures at temperature 3 of 2,335 Kelvin. Using this information that we obtained from looking up on tables, looking up online, or actually testing, we have populated the information that we need to fill out our PV and TS diagram with the values highlighted in red. The remaining values we were able to calculate given the formulas obtained in our thermodynamics book for the ideal OTTO cycle. As you can see down here at the bottom, we were able to calculate T2 of 855 Kelvin. Our pressure at 0.3 was 2,446 kPa. Our temperature at 0.4, which is at the heat addition process, was 961 Kelvin. And then these values allowed us to calculate our Q in and Q out to receive our Q net of 625 kilojoules per kilogram. Using the same information, we were able to do our boundary work calculations from 0.1 to 0.2 and the boundary work from 0.3 to 0.4 to give us our net work between the points of 0.234 kilojoules per Kelvin. This net work and the Qn gives us an efficiency of 22.05% for this high mileage engine. Now we'll go through the same process again, but working on the ideal gas cycle analysis. For the ideal OTTO cycle, as you can see here at the top, we still used our calculated and measured values for 0.1 and the volumes at 0.2, 3, and 4. Again, we looked up the information out of the table at the back of the book for the properties of air. And then the other information that we actually looked up was the published specification of this engine when it was new, having a compression ratio of 9.5 to 1. We also obtained the optimum intake air temperature of 323 Kelvin, and then the average combustion temperature of 2,500 Kelvin. Taking these values into account, we were able to go back through the process using these formulas to calculate our T2, our P2, our P3, and our P4, and our T4. From the same information, we were able to calculate our Q in and our Q out, which allowed us to calculate our Q net of 724.61 kilojoules per kilogram. We followed this up with the boundary work formulas between 0.1 and 0.2, and the boundary work from 0.3 to 0.4. Having that information allowed us to calculate our net work of 0.1419 kilojoules per kilogram. All this together gives us a combined efficiency of 59.36%. Again, this is on the ideal OTTO cycle. Next, we'll actually compare our results from the actual engine to the values that we obtained here for the ideal OTTO cycle. Now, looking at our values from the ideal to the actual, one of the key things that stands out is our pressure at 0.2 between the two scenarios. In the ideal OTTO cycle, based on the temperatures and pressures from 0.1 to 0.2, 0.2 has a pressure of 2,361 Kelvin. From our actual measurements taken on the engine at 0.2 at the top of the compression cycle, we were reaching 896 kPa. One contributing factor for this variance is, again, this is a high mileage motor, and it, components in it begin to wear. We may not be getting as much compression in the cylinders as we did when it was new. This difference in pressure ultimately comes down and affects the actual efficiency of the engine. As you can see, in the ideal engine, we had 59.36% efficiency. In the actual engine, we have a efficiency of 22%. Other things to note is the pressures from 0.3 and 0.4, the actual measurements off the engine were less than what we calculated from the ideal. And of course, with lower pressures, some of the temperatures also ended up reading lower, from 0.2 of 855 Kelvin to the ideal of 784 Kelvin. And on 0.4, 961 Kelvin versus 1030 Kelvin. The keys. So what does this difference in efficiency actually tell us? Is it the sole defining factor that tells us how much improvement or how much lack of improvement that we could get for the fuel economy of our vehicles? Well, let's take a look at this as a scenario. So in the ideal calculations, we were at almost 60% efficiency. Ideally, the truck gets 24 miles per gallon. And if we say an average price a gallon of $2.50 with driving 15,000 miles a year, that means we spend a little over $1,500 in gasoline. Now, if we take that assumption of efficiency and break that down to what would our miles per gallon be per percent of efficiency, we would take our 24 miles per gallon, divide it by 59 to get us down to 1%. And that would give us a mile per gallon per efficiency of 0.4 miles per gallon. And then, of course, if we take that, multiply by 100%, that would give us 40.43 miles per gallon based on just that efficiency scale. Now, if we take the same calculations and apply it to the actual measurements that we received off the engine, remember the engine was at 22.05% efficiency, and I averaged around 20 miles per gallon. At the same cost and annual usage, I spend about $1,800
almost $1,900 on fuel. So it's cost me, a little over $300 more than if this engine was running in the ideal condition. But if we take that same breakdown of 20 miles per gallon, break that down to single percent efficiency, so that would be taking 20 divided by the 22, gives us 0.9 miles per gallon, and then multiply that by 100 for a full 100% efficiency. That tells us it would be almost 91 miles per gallon. So what does that all mean? There's a lot more to play in the total efficiency of the truck than just the thermal efficiency of the engine. But for this comparison, we wanted to look at just the thermal efficiency of an actual engine versus the ideal OTTO cycle. And again, we concluded that the ideal OTTO cycle was almost 60% efficient, while our actual truck was 22% efficient, a difference of almost 40%. So does this mean we'll be looking for a new vehicle? Unlikely. I like my truck.